another episode of the Verpedia podcast brought to you by Kachelan-Pharma Research Limited. And today, on this episode, we are excited to dive into the fascinating world of environmental factors and their impact on animal well-being. Joining me today is Mr. Adeola Kudoro, an expert in poultry farming. Together, we would investigate how environmental factors shape the lives of animals and the health of our planet.
I am Kudoro Adeola Kudoro. I am a graduate animal scientist, and upon graduation, I've been into poultry farming. So I have quite a number of years of poultry farming. It is my pleasure to be here.
Okay, thank you so much, Mr. Kudoro Adeola, for gracing the show today. Okay, so what are the effects of air pollution on respiratory health in livestock?
Thank you for that question. Respiratory health in livestock is deeply impacted by air pollution, and one of the major impacts it has on livestock animals, though it's not limited to livestock animals. This air pollution also affects pets like dogs, cats, and the likes. So respiratory diseases that affect them mostly as a result of air pollution is asthma. And asthma is actually a chronic lung disease affecting livestock of all ages. It is caused by inflammation and muscle tightening around the airways. It makes it difficult to breathe. Sometimes the symptoms can be coughing, wheezing, shortness of breath, and and chest tightness. And this affects the respiratory functions of these animals, whether pet animals or livestock.
Thank you so much for that. Okay, now let's move to temperature extreme. How does temperature extremes like heat or cold stress impact animal productivity and mortality?
All right. Temperature extremes, whether hot or cold, affect animals, various kinds of animals. The same way hot temperature and cold temperature affect humans. The same way it affects us, that is the same way it affects animals. And for even us as humans to perform at optimum, there has to be a level of temperature that we are comfortable with. The same thing applies to animals, whether different kind of livestock. It could be cattle, it could be poultry, even pet animals such as dogs. So for these animals to perform at optimum, there is a particular temperature where they are comfortable to survive and at the same time be productive. So whenever we have a temperature condition that is extreme, it means their normal day-to-day activities will be almost impossible. For instance, when there is high temperature, there might be low consumption of food, because normally when we consume food, the end point is it generates heat in our body. So if there is high temperature outside and the food that is being consumed is also producing high temperature, and the two come together, it results in heat stress on the animal. This that I'm explaining has to do mostly with poultry. And also, when there are very low weather conditions, it also have a whole lot of impact on their day-to-day productive and reproductive activity.
Okay, so basically, we all know that water is very, very essential, right? Both to humans and animals. Now, what role do water quality and availability play in maintaining animal health?
Thank you. Water is very important for survival of living things generally, and this also applies to animals. There's an adage that says water is life, and it actually is. Water is life. It means there is nothing that animals can eat and they do not take water and they will do well. So irrespective of the food, irrespective of the substance we are giving to our animals, it is very important that water is part of it. And this water has to be quality. There's this characteristics of water that we learned while we were in secondary school. We learned that water is colorless, odorless, and tasteless. Mm-hmm. So anything that is different from these characteristics I've just mentioned is a bad water. And the water quality and availability actually plays a very crucial role in maintaining animal health, as water is essential for sustaining life, and in fact it ranks second to oxygen in importance. Also, animal needs a whole lot of water. For instance, if the temperature is high, one of the things that animals need to maintain their body temperature or to cool down is water. I also know that water is very important for digestion. Mm-hmm. If animals consume feed and they do not take water, they cannot digest what they have eaten. Mm-hmm. So it is very, very important. It actually has a lot of importance that I may not be able to mention in this episode. So okay. I would like to stop on that note. Anyway.
All right, no problem. Thank you very much, sir. Okay, so let's move to noise levels. How do noise levels and types of noise levels affect animal stress and behavior? Everybody is familiar with stress. Everybody's familiar with cold. Now let's move to noise levels. I'm very sure people don't really know or are not familiar with noise levels or how it can affect animal behavior and productivity.
All right. Even though it may not be something that people are actually informed about, mm-hmm. Noise, as much as it affects humans, okay. affects animals as well. Because they may not be able to complain to us that they are being disturbed by this noise. We would not know that they are being impacted by it, but we can see from their production that there is actually a problem. For instance, I am more competent with poultry. If you sight a poultry in an environment whereby there is noise, okay. It means whenever the birds are hearing noises, it can result in a whole lot of stress on them, because by the time they hear the noise, especially when it comes suddenly, they might begin to agitate. And if there are animals that are laying eggs, you would realize that they might begin to lay cracked eggs. So noise has a whole lot of effects on animals. So it has effect on stress. Animals have a lot. They have a lot of stress. They experience a lot of stress as a result of noise. As I think I will be able to. I would like to stop on that note. Okay, let me add this to it. Pain. Apart from stress, it can be painful to be in a place where there is a whole lot of noise, and that is why they respond by running, agitating, and all sorts of things that even when we see them, we can see for ourselves that these birds are actually stressed. Okay. They are actually experiencing something that is painful. Okay. And also fear. Noise can instigate fear in the heart of animals. Okay. You might think that how does fear has to do with animals? But noise, when they hear noise, they are scared because they don't know what will come out of the noise. So it instigates a whole lot of fear on them.
All right, thank you very much. What are the impacts of soil contamination on animal health and productivity?
soil contamination. I think I like that question because when you look at it, and it might be as if the soil. How does it affect livestock? But come to think of it, the soil is where what we eat comes out from. So it means the food chain will come from even the food that is being generated from those contaminated soil, and it will get to the animals. Irrespective of the kind of animals that they are, whether poultry, whether ruminant, be it goat, be it sheep, be it cattle, and be it pet animals, dogs, cats, and even wild animals. They consume things that are cultivated in the soil. So if the soil is contaminated, most of the food or the food that are being cultivated on such lands will carry residues of the contamination. And remember that when they eat those food that have residues of contamination, it begins to settle down in their body as well. And continuous exposure to food that is being produced on soil that is contaminated will ultimately result in contamination of the animals themselves. And also remember, if the soil is contaminated and there is something like maybe rainfall and all that, you know that when there is rainfall, there is possibility that there is something like maybe flooding, whereby the contamination of the soil can also get into the water bodies. And somehow, since the animals cannot survive without taking water. Take for instance, if you are rearing cattle, some of these cattle, they go to rivers to drink water. They go to streams to drink water. So if the soil is contaminated, the contamination, whether it is heavy metals, whether it is pesticide, it will still find its way into the water bodies. Okay. And these animals that are being reared, they have access to this water. And as a result of this, they will be having deposit of dangerous materials in their body, which will ultimately result into an health condition that may appear in different forms and types.
Thank you so much, Mr. Adeola. Let's quickly try to trap in climate change. What are the effects of climate change on disease prevalence and distribution in animals?
Climate change. Climate change is one of the things that is being experienced all over the world. So irrespective of your location, the climates are gradually changing, and most of this change are occasioned by human activities in mining, in every industrial activity. So because of all these activities that is being engaged in by humans, our climatic conditions are gradually changing, which means if you are rearing your animals in certain areas and you are used to certain diseases in that environment, you are already used to how to manage those diseases, and then you are able to successfully raise your animals. But as the climate is changing, there are introduction of new diseases that it requires a keen observation for anyone that is keeping animals to know when there are introduction of diseases or disease conditions that are not prevalent in such areas before. So there are areas by which change in the climatic conditions affect animals or affect the prevalence and distribution of animals. It alters the distribution of disease-carrying insects like ticks, midges, mosquitoes, and it also increases the spread of diseases through contaminated water and food sources. It also causes stress on animals and as a result of the stress, it makes them more susceptible to disease. Also, it increases the frequency of extreme weather events, which can cause an increase in disease cases. So you would see that change in climatic conditions have a whole lot of impact on prevalence and distribution of diseases. So for anyone that is involved in animal production, or for anyone that has pets, there is a need for us to be on the lookout in order to be able to detect on time whenever there are disease conditions in our livestock animals.
Thank you so much for that amazing point, Mr. Adeola. Okay, earlier on in one of the previous questions, you mentioned pesticides. Now, how does exposure to pesticides and herbicides impact animal health and development?
All right, thank you for that question. Like I've said earlier on, pesticides and herbicides, they are not primarily bad things. They are materials that are being used for a certain purpose, and this purpose is also in an attempt to produce food that would be consumed by animals. But while it is being used on the soil to prepare soil, to make the soil to be free from weed in order for planting to occur, it must be noted that there's a need for a careful use of this pesticide, which could be of this pesticide. You know, I've been talking about soil, and the one that applies to that, which is herbicide, is for the killing of weeds. Even though for soils that has insect infestations which can ultimately affect the crops planted on the soil, there's a need for insecticide and other kind of pesticide, such as fungicides, if there's a need for it on the soil. So how does pesticide and herbicide affect animal health? It affects animal health because whatever is being planted on these soils is still going to be fed to animals. So there's a need to be careful with the quantity of these pesticides that are being used. You know, for many farmers, what they do is that they can overdose, they can use more than the prescribed quantity by the pesticide producer, and as a result of this, it will increase the pesticide residue in the soil. And when these residues are left in the soil, it means part of the residues will enter into the food that is being produced. For instance, if it is maize that is planted on that soil, it means part of the residue of the pesticide and maybe herbicide or insecticide that is being used indiscriminately on the soil, some of it will enter into the crop, maybe maize and what have you. And as a result, since all these things that are being produced is still going to be consumed by humans, so they are still going to find their way back into the systems of animals. So pesticide and herbicide indiscriminate use can have a lot of negative impact on animals when they consume these animals. And also, pesticide and herbicide, when they are being used on soil, it can, like I've mentioned earlier on, during rainfall or what have you, it can still have access into water bodies. And if these animals have access to this same water, it is going to impact a lot on their health. Even though some of these effects may not be seen on time, sometimes it might have to accumulate in their body, because really the quantity that will cause harm in the animals is quite a number, it's quite much. So it takes continuous exposure to this contaminated water, to this contaminated food, for the animals to now begin to show symptoms of diseases. So even though we are not seeing symptoms yet in our animals, it is very important that we are careful enough to ensure that the food that they are consuming, the water that they are consuming are of high quality.
Thank you so much. What are the impacts of industrial activities like mining, drilling on animal health and ecosystems?
Thank you very much for that question. Industrial activities have a whole lot of effect on the life of living organisms generally, because take for instance, if you are living close to a place where there are maybe cement factory, where there are industry whereby the end product releases different kinds of different kinds of chemicals. Some of them release different kinds of heavy metals into the atmosphere. So if one is also rearing animals in such environment, one way or the other, the heavy metals we have access one way or the other into the water bodies, and these animals can consume them. Some of these heavy metals, some of these pollutants, some of them are in the atmosphere. So just by breathing in the air, you are already having some of the pollutants in your body. So the same thing applies to animals. So if animals are being reared in environments whereby there are mining activities, there are industrial activities, it actually poses a threat on the living and the health of the animal, because little by little they are taking in different kinds of end products of all these industrial activities into their body, and it will ultimately impact on their health, even though it may not be instant like I have mentioned. So we shouldn't wait until there's a problem before we act. Immediately we notice that there is an industrial activity going on around where we stay or where we are rearing our animals, we should relocate our animals away from those areas in order to ensure that their life is preserved. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Rounding up the show now, I would like you to enlighten us on how soil erosion can impact pasture quality and animal nutrition.
Thank you. Soil erosion has a whole lot of impact on pasture quality. Now, this applies mostly to ruminant animals that depends on pasture, that depend on various types of grasses for their food. And in lands where there are soil erosion, it means continuously the topsoil is being eroded away, which means most of this soil there will begin to exist very little quantity of growth of this pasture, because as the rainfall is resulting in soil erosion, the topsoil is being eroded, and then after a long period of time there will gradually be unavailability of pasture for animals that are being reared in that environment.
Thank you for joining us in this episode of the Vetpedia podcast. We hope you've enjoyed our conversation with Mr. Adeola Kudoro about the impact of environmental factors on animal health and well-being. Remember, every small action we take can make a big difference in the lives of animals and the health of our planet. Join us next time as we continue to investigate the intricate connections between our world and the creatures we share it with.